Hi everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of the Stakeholders Podcast, brought to you in conjunction with Boehringer Ingelheim. I'm Neil Shine, joined again tonight by Ben Harmon, our chairman, James Herrick, MBE board member, and Shonid, our regular attendee from Boehringer, is on holiday this week, so we're going to attempt to cover the Blue Tongue update ourselves. So what I can tell you is that we're still seeing cases updated on a fairly regular basis on government website. All the same stuff, calves born, neurological signs, early or late abortions in cows, lots of dead calves, lots of calves, non-viable calves. It's the same thing time and time again. And we can only encourage people to speak to the private vet and have a detailed discussion about vaccinating for blue tongue before cows are turned out, if they are not already turned out. Obviously we've got different challenges now. There's been several cases of blue tongue 8 down in the southwest. That's not the case probably in the Midlands or in the north of England at least. So some people will have to have two discussions with a vet on blue tongue, one on blue tongue 3 and the other on blue tongue 8. And we need to be quite clear on that there are two serotypes circulating at the moment, and depending on where you are, it will need a serious discussion, because we have I think at least one now confirmed case of aborted calf or a dead calf from blue tongue 8. So it's not just blue tongue 3 that is challenging our livestock. So yeah, that's us. Without Shonid, we're not completely lost. James, you vaccinated last year. Have you done it again this year?
Yeah, so we went through just pre-calving, gave everything a 1-dose booster, having obviously given the double dose last year, and they were done so that as soon as we started calving, we could turn them out in whatever mobs they were going into, wherever they were going, job done for the summer, don't have to think about it, don't have to worry about it. And so far, as far as calving to going, we've calved well over half, not had any signs of anything. Everything's been good, despite the fact that there has been a few in our kind of area. So yeah, it's been good, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, no, great. Ben?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of a hot spot around Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire, and we do know a few folks who suffered. And on a slightly different take from this, I just, because it's that time of year, renewed my insurance with the NFU Mutual. Other insurance companies are available. Oh my God, that was a lot of money. And if you look at the price of ensuring that your cattle are not going to be infected with blue tongue, how much is it actually costing you? It's way cheap. It's such a cheap insurance policy. So why would you not do it? So yes, I'll do mine again. And I love the security that it brings me, and the fact I don't have to worry about those stargazing calves and all that kind of stuff. It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah. So we hope as many people do that as possible. We're just going to chit-chat about some of the current pressing issues in the industry, but just for our listeners, we will be joined shortly by ex-England rugby player Julian White MBE. He is our guest on tonight's podcast, so we look forward to that later. Quite an interesting character by all accounts. I think if we've got anything dodgy to say about him, guys, we should say it now, because I don't have the balls to say it when he does arrive. But hey ho, we're looking forward to that. But current challenges, all the chat is fuel price, fertiliser price. Fertilisers is available, guys. I've heard 60 to 80, £100 more expensive than last year. Red diesel's a different story. So what's the local news you guys are hearing?
Well, I had a CFA, contract farming agreement meeting with my contractor last week. He's so worried about about the availability of red diesel that he's bought himself 50,000 litres, which should keep him going for up to harvest. And that's at a price that is more or less double what it was before. I'm going to try not to defame the President of the United States before this rather strange man kicked off a war for a reason that we're still not sure about.
It's okay, Ben. I don't think he's listening, so you're probably all right.
I understand he's a very keen listener to our podcast. So we're not seeing grain prices rise, but there's so many people in the world that are struggling to buy their fertilizer or struggling to buy their diesel, and planting isn't going in Australia, I'm led to believe. I can't for the life of me figure out why grain prices aren't going up when the inputs are going up at the rate they are. They would usually follow, albeit with a bit of a lag. I was told the other day that City Money is now looking at grain futures, so maybe that will see them tick up a little bit. But I think they popped up to about 184 in November now, which is a little bit higher than they were, but it's still not high enough to pay back on the extra input costs. Yeah,
No,
difficult
no.
year, isn't it?
And James, just before we come back to you for your local news, your contractor's done the right thing to cover his base, Ben, but he's probably created a shortage locally by ordering £66,000 worth of diesel or whatever it was. It's a, if everyone keeps buying or stick to their normal routine, that's what the specialists and the agencies tell everyone to do. Just keep buying your normal, then it won't create a shortage and it won't cause further fuel increase spikes. So
Well, go and tell that to the people who are buying loo paper back at the beginning of COVID.
yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty sure some people are still using that actually.
I reckon.
Yeah, and I get the point. It just is, when everyone realizes there's plenty available in July and August when harvest comes, I'm pretty sure it won't come down in price accordingly. But fingers crossed. James, what's your local news?
Yeah, I mean, for us, again, fuel price is ridiculous. I don't even know what I've paid for my last load of fuel. We ordered it and they just went, you'll get a bill based on what it was on that day. And that was about 3 weeks ago and we still haven't had the bill yet. So I think they're just putting some zeros on the end of it for us. But then, we're looking forward. We were lucky with fertiliser price because we bought it early before any of this kicked off and it was in the shed. So that was good for us. But again, there's a lot of people that aren't in that position. Spoke to some dairy farmers at a grazing meeting that I did a talk at a week or so ago, and a lot of those guys had bought a load early, but then they usually buy some later on, and they were thinking, how are we going to do this? Milk prices dropped and so on and so forth. And we're coming into the time now we're going to start making some winter forage. We've got plastic going up. All of these things that we've got to start and consider. Are we going to start making plans for next winter? But that's one thing we do have on the bright side is we can make plans for next winter. What are we going to do for feeding our cattle and so on if we're going to have to pay more money for plastic, diesel, contractors, whatever we're going to do. So it's a funny old world we're living in at the minute.
Yeah, and James, I think that's a really good piece of advice actually. And I'll paraphrase what you said. Don't bury your head in the sand now and wait for it to get better. Make it better yourself. Plan your own system better. Because, I've got one or two stories of people that have called and said, well, I waited for, the Iran war to finish in a week, like the aforementioned gentleman that Ben said it would, and it didn't. And, so he might have been able to get fertiliser at a more reasonable price if he had taken a gamble and done it early rather than wait till 4 or 5 weeks in when it's doubled. Increase is not, don't get me wrong, fertiliser price is not doubled, but the initial step increase has since doubled. All good advice. And I think plastic, it's a very pertinent point. So I'm hearing stories that a roll of plastic for tube lining or plastic wrap and silage bales is going from £55 to £85 for a roll. That's and it's phrases other people use. I'm not a great fan of it, but that's baked in now, as some other people would say, and it'll be there for forever. That inflation is in. It's in for this season. The situation in Iran could stop tomorrow, Saturday, or next week, but that plastic price is now fixed for this season.
Yeah.
And the reality is that people are going to have to spend more. Food is going to go more expensive. I'll mention something later about a statement a politician made in Scotland, but I'll wait for Julian to join about that on, the simple solution to get food prices down is just tell retailers to do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work for him.
It's the naivety of some of the people that are running the country, perhaps, or at least have ambitions to run parts of the country.
Now, on a positive note, though, James, the grass is growing on my farm, and I'm rubbish at growing grass. So round you, it must be up your ears by now.
Yeah, grass is great at the minute. So we measured grass last week. We were growing at 30 kilos. Because I'm going to get technical. We were growing at 30 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day last week, and that was that's pretty good for this time of year. It's been a little bit slow, but it's got really going. And then today I was moving a big bunch of bulling heifers, and we've had to split the paddocks in half because they just can't keep up. So they went from having 900 available per hectare to having 1,700 in a week. It's gone mad. But I'm not complaining because I like having grass. So, we can't complain that. And again, when price for feed is we know what it is, and it potentially go up or whatever. Having grass in stock is something we can't complain about.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of years recently where we haven't had grass at this time of year.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have what feels like, weather-wise, a fairly
Yeah.
normal kind of
Yeah, and
year.
this is the time of year when you grow your grass, so make the most of it. That's
Yeah,
what I'll say to anyone who make the most of it, because this is when you want to have it.
yeah.
Yeah, no, great. So I think we're just being joined now by Julian, so we can move on to that bit of the podcast. Folks, we've got ex-England and Leicester Tigers rugby player Julian White with us tonight. Julian, I'm going to introduce you to our team. I'm Neil Shand. I'm Chief Executive of National Beef Association, with an accent that probably gets the hairs on the back of your neck up when it comes to your sport. So we'll maybe come back to the Scotland-England games later. We've got Ben Harmon, who is our current chairman, and Ben is an ex-rugby commentator and rugby player, and you might have crossed paths with him sometime in the past. And James, your not-so-distant neighbour, is on the board of the MBE. So we're delighted you can join us. And we're just planning to have a chit chat about all things that you want to tell us about. Of course, we're generally focusing on beef production, and we know that you've got cattle, you've also got sheep, and a massive interest in farming. So, what's your view on the state of the industry at the moment?
Well, I think as a farmer, I think you've got to try and be half full rather than half empty. I think all farmers are eternal optimists, because if you looked at it, the reality is it's been pretty tough for the last 20 years, 25 years, or even longer. Do you know what I mean? So I think perhaps we're at a bit of a turning point at the moment, and I think I've probably been saying this for like the last 15 years, but I do think with the current climate and that I think there's a lot of positives, and it's obviously a fantastic industry to get people involved with. But yeah, it has been pretty trying.
Yeah, I mean, I think both cattle and sheep prices are quite strong at the moment, so there are returns in there. There have been challenging times, and we've got the current challenges are price of red diesel and price of fertilizer, and other oil-based products further down the line are going to see massive spikes in prices due to the ongoing situation in Iran. But there's not a lot we can do based on what other people do in a global context.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think as farmers, we've got to perhaps start looking at using some of these byproducts to put on our, we've been very reliant on fertilizer. I know there's no way, for a lot of farmers, there's no way around that, because it's a guaranteed result. But whether we can start using, obviously there's been sewage sludge used and stuff like that, and this effluent from, what they're called, crikey.
Like biogas plants.
Yeah, biogas plants and things like that. People are spreading it on around here at the moment, and perhaps that's the way forward to try and complete the cycle. And some of this waste product somewhere else, if we can make use of it and it's going to help our systems, perhaps that would be a better way of looking at it longer term. I don't know, but I mean, the bottom line is it's got to stack up, isn't it? It's like planting all these flowers and herbal leaves and all the rest of it. It's got to pay at the end of it. That's the thing.
Yeah, and so we are a trade body, and we are here to not tonight, of course, but we exist as an organisation to challenge government, obviously. So if you don't want to answer some of the questions, just say so. But we're not very impressed with what the current government have done in their 19-20 months so far in terms of supporting agriculture. And England is now basically the only country in the whole of the EU that gets no form of, let's say, food support subsidy. And it stands alone now, and different from Wales, although less different from Wales than it is different from Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it's still different. And that frustrates us, and I'm sure it maybe frustrates you too.
Well, I mean, I've started from absolute scratch, and I know how hard it is, and if it's not, it's like anything, it's like sport. If it's not a level playing field, it's not right, is it? But this government at the moment, I just think that we're a very small voice, and they think they can just brush us aside, and it's not until they get short of food, or that perhaps what's happening in other parts of the world at the moment is focusing their mind that they can't just bring it in from anywhere when they want it, because we've only got a very short-term supply, and once there's a kink in that supply chain, we can get short of food very, very quickly. So perhaps that's focusing their minds a bit.
Yeah, it's a very just-in-time system for a lot of food nowadays, and it does concern us that, there's been kinks in the pipe. COVID created a few, Ukraine, and we've now got the current situation, but I would still be a little bit, and this is my view, reserved in terms of what the government actually see. We're all for supporting the environment in every way we can, and we have a Climate Act, which means that, supporting the environment is now embedded in law, but we don't have a Food Security Act, and that's maybe what we're missing, and that would maybe drive things in a different direction.
I just think that food has been we're saying that prices are better, they are better for sure, but it's just been so bad for so long that there's been so many producers driven out because they couldn't make it didn't pay, or they got fed up with it, that there's no one left now, and they can't just keep hammering it home and driving home cheap food, because it's not sustainable, and they're running out of people to keep, where are they going to get it from? I mean, it seems to me like that everywhere that beef's getting, in Europe, across the whole of the world, beef is, is reducing all the time, but demand is going up.
Absolutely, beef demand globally is growing, and production is mostly not keeping in line with that. So I want to quote a political comment I heard this week from one of the Scottish parties that is lining up for the May elections, when the leader of the Scottish Labour Party said if elected, they would sit down with the supermarkets and tell them to reduce prices. And I'm afraid that's the naivety of some of the people that are at least endeavouring to run our country. So anyway, I've said enough on that for now. Ben, I think we should move a little bit away from farming for a time and head towards rugby.
Yeah. Right. So Julian, so I'm Ben, and I farm in Buckinghamshire. I've got some cattle and some arable and whatnot, and I feel like you're a kindred spirit, and I'll tell you why. So, I'm a huge rugby nose, and I've actually met you on a couple of occasions, going back an awful long way. 2000 and when were you playing at Sarah's? 2001?
Yeah,
around there.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah, 2000. It was 2000, 2000. I think it was something like that. Yeah, 2001.
So I sat next to you and Flats, David Flatman, and Tony Diprose. And then Richard Hill came out in his bare feet and pulled his socks on, and we were all watching Yanni De Beer the first time he turned up to play for Saracens in an A-League game,
right,
after having pulled the poo off the pitch at Southgate like we used to have to. So going back a long way. But I feel like kindred spirit because, farming and rugby. So were you always into farming? Like, when did that love of farming sort of come alive with you?
I just it's always been there. But my parents weren't farmers, and I've sort of said before that I sort of grew up with my father, and he spent the whole time just saying, "Don't be a farmer, don't be a farmer. There's no hope of being a farmer." And I played my whole life. Things have sort of fallen into place really by But I played rugby, and I went to New Zealand because I thought they'd milk cows and they play rugby, and that sounded okay to me. So I went there for a very short period of time. I mean, I had no plans, and I ended up staying there for a couple of years, and that sort of got my rugby career going. And then, at the back of my mind, I always wanted I was going to go back to I was going to farm at the end of it. And initially, I thought I went to New Zealand, and I realized at a time when there was lots of share farming, and I thought, well, that would be a way of getting into farming, perhaps. So I saved some money up. I went from New Zealand to a club in Wales and played there, and I used to milk every morning and most evenings, and then I sort of saved my rugby money up, and I was going to go back to New Zealand and buy a dairy herd, or start buying some dairy cows and try and be share farming, and that's what was. And anyway, my rugby sort of was gaining more and more pace. I ended up, obviously didn't go to New Zealand, and I went to Leicester, and Sarah, my wife, when we got together, which was quite a while ago now, she sort of said, "What are you going to do when you finish rugby?" And so many players are going to be coaches, or you're in a bubble when you're playing rugby. You're told what to eat and and it's fantastic. It's amazing, And I just sort of 1 year, you get offered another contract, and it keeps going and it keeps going. And I just thought, when I finish, I'll go and buy a little cottage somewhere and go and milk cows somewhere or something like that. And so my wife said to me that, you couldn't do that. You couldn't go and work for somebody now. Let's just do it. Just do it ourselves. But it's one thing working for somebody. It's something completely different. started from scratch. So I literally like rented a field, bought a few sheep, and sort of grew from there. You know, and we farm 500 acres now. We've got 700 ewes, 100 suckler cows, and yeah, I'm still sort of muddling along, really.
So I've been doing it all my life, and I'm still muddling along. James Herrick has been doing it all his life, which is considerably shorter, and he doesn't appear to be muddling along at all.
Yeah.
I'm pretty jealous of that.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
For someone from a non-farming background to combine the learning how to farm with your rugby. So you've gone to New Zealand, you're shearing, you're milking, but you've got no experience in that. So you've just sort of gone all balls out and just walked up to a farmer and said, "Come on then, mate, I need a job because I'm playing rugby down the road." How did that work?
That's pretty much it, really. I went with a mate, went travelling, and I'd worked on farms when I was young, you know, before I sort of always done, really. And my parents were farmers, but when I was very young, put this like when I was 9 or 10, there was like a local family and their children were away at boarding school. I'd go there at the weekends, they'd put a flat cap on me, and I'd ride around the Land Rover and cut Swedes and cut cauliflowers, and so it was amazing. Do you know what I mean? We'd go and roll barley, and it's just the smell of it, you know, and the smell of the silage, and I just thought, you know, I just loved it, you know. And yeah, so I'd worked on farms, but like I say, it's one thing working on farms, you know, at the end of the day you go home, and I'm not saying you don't think about it, but you're not living it 24/7, you know. I was playing rugby, you know, and I'd turn up to training with some bullocks in the back of in a cattle box, and there's like Mercedes, BMW, knackered out Nissan pickup with some bullocks in the back rattling around, you know what I mean? And yeah, I remember going to Melton Mowbray and we were doing pre-season, and this was sort of later in my career. And cockers, you know, you're always 5 minutes early, and you know, you're giving your kits all laid out. I mean, I used to go to training, and we had like an electric gate to go in, and I'd lose my key fob, so I'd be like getting undressed, running across the car park, taking my overalls off. The kit man would run out with some kit for me because I was late for a meeting. Throw my wellies in the changing room, and the boys thought it was brilliant. But in actual fact, it used to help me because my adrenaline was pumping so high. You know, you'd go into a section and you scrum, you know, and yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it works for everyone, but it worked for me, you know. So that's what I did. You know, we started off with a few bullocks and a few sheep, and then my wife bought me a cow because I was passionate about the old South Devon. So, and we built up from there, really.
All right. So speaking of turning up late to training, I was watching a story about you the other day. Apparently, you turned up to England training a little bit late. You come on your motorcycle. It was 10 or 15 minutes after. Pretty much drive onto the pitch with your leathers on and a helmet under your arm.
Honestly, it's just back then, you know, we were at the Pennyhill Park, and it's like this really, it's a pretty swanky hotel, you know, and yeah, everyone's going around. You've got to have been the right kit, and you've got to have your diary under your arm, and like you've got to be 5 minutes early for every meeting. I just don't know what I was thinking. I just bought this new motorbike. I thought, I'm going to ride on a motorbike. I just got a bit sidetracked on the way down there, and pulled in, and it was that horrible feeling where you were like, the time was like half an hour out, and I sort of went into the hotel. And it was just not anyone. There was no staff. There was no one, because normally there's somebody running across to get to a meeting room with they're a bit late, but they're going to get there on time. But there was none of that, and I thought, it's not good. And I was marching through the car park with my leathers on, and anyway, went into the hotel, and we had like we used to call it the war room, you know, and you had all your meetings there, and there was Clive, and I could just hear his voice going when I got to the end of the corridor, you know what I mean? And I knew then I was in a world of pain, and I wasn't even in the right kit, you know, I didn't have a light England kit on, so I was in my leathers. It was just... It was horrendous. So then the only good point was I walked in, and Mark Regan was sat at the back, and he shouted. It was like an eerie silence. I walked in there, and he said, "Here, Bab, who ordered a pizza?" You know, and they thought it was hilarious, and that broke the silence. And I was dropped for that weekend. I was going to be starting, and I was then dropped. So yeah, it was quite an expensive learning curve.
Yeah, there was a guy.
That would have been under Clive, wouldn't that have been under Clive Woodward?
Yeah.
He was notorious for being punctual, wasn't he? And like, didn't he bring in Lombardy time?
Yeah.
Getting there 5 minutes early.
Absolutely.
You got to be on time. And because you were notoriously late. Anyone who's listening to this as well, Julian was late to this podcast because he's notoriously late for everything.
I can only apologise about that. And
no, that's not a problem.
Yeah, but
yeah, because you did, am I right in thinking? Was there a story that you had some like training times altered so that you could do some farming?
I can't. It's embarrassing even explaining it. But I used to. I mean, I look back now, and I'm sorry for my wife to say, for God's sake, stop being a diva Jew, you know. And we'd have a few sheep. And, I mean, we played Wales, We played against Wales. We're down there, and after like a Six Nations match, there's lots of like pomp and ceremony, and you go in and you've got you get a suit, and you go into a room and you have a few drinks, and you come out, you put a black tie on, go off somewhere else. And I said, "Oh, we're lambing at home. Can I go back? We've got a few problems. I've got to go back." The coach at the time, Brian Ashton, sort of went, "What?" And I said, "Look, I need to go back." And he said, "Look, if you've got to do, you just got to do what you're going to do, White. If that's what you're going to do, you just go back." So I jumped in my car and roared off and went lambing all night. The following day was like, recoveries. And then I came back on the Monday ready for training. And yeah, I'm not proud of it. Looking back, I should just like got my head down and just, but at the same time, it sort of spurred me on. Do you know what I mean? I had a goal to keep going,
Tell me about the South Devons then. So I understand your first South Devon was a present.
Yeah, well, Sarah, we had some sheep, and I was looking at getting some. I wanted to get some suckler cows, but I was obviously playing rugby, and anyway, she sort of said, "Oh, what would you really like?" And having grown up in the South Hams, I always admired South Devons and wanted them. So anyway, she got me a cow for Christmas, and that was sort of the floodgates then. So we started buying. We started off, we bought all yearlings basically. And I went round to a lot of the older herds down in Devon. And I'm still pretty anal now about all the old bloodlines and, how they follow through and that consistency. So we bought all yearlings basically and bred the herd up from there, really.
Do you performance record with those? Do you show with those? What's your view on
I
the
don't
pedigree aspect?
performance record. I should performance record. A lot of it is time, facilities. We couldn't afford to buy a farm, so we bought a block of ground and we built a farm from scratch. I put some buildings up, the trouble is you need to have more stock because you've got bills to pay. The more stock you got, the busier you are. I haven't got any family around here. We haven't got any family to help us out. So I'm lambing at the moment. We're lambing just under 700 outside, and I'm on my Todd just doing it. Just 100 cows. I'm carving them myself. It's busy,
So how's it going?
It's going all right. It's going all right. The calving's going all right. We're calving some two-year-olds now, and I've had to turn everything out because I ran out of silage about 6 weeks ago, a month ago. The cows were on cabbage for quite a while, cabbage and straw and whatever I could get really. But like I say, everything's out now. The grass is disappearing pretty quickly, and the cows. We finished carving the cows. That's touch wood. It's been a good carving, and lambing is really slow. Yeah. So, and I used to, I started off with some Charolais because I used to look at the Farmers Weekly, and the Charolais were always winning at the show. So we started off with a little flock of pedigree Charolais, and I realised that wasn't the way for me. And we bought some Clins and crossed them with the Charolais. Anyway, I've had all sorts of breeds, and now there's a guy called Hayden Woolley who's got this company called Low Footprint Lamb. I'm not trying to do a sales pitch here, but I've been using his rams. I met him at Groundswell and was just talking, and he's just got so much information about these sheep. So I'm basically using his rams on the flock of ewes I had, which were basically, there's a lot of Suffolk Scotch half-breds and Texel out of Suffolk Scotch half-breds, like these massive sheep. So I'm using his rams now, and I'm trying to breed a flock of woolly sheep. And I'm hoping that with the ewes I've got, I might have got a bit more growth and a bit more size. And once I've got a shedding flock, then I can put whatever rams I want back on them. That's my sheep.
Right. And then with the South, sorry, I'm dominating. And then with the South Devons, so what's the plan there? Are you selling bulls? Are you managing to move some breeding females on?
Yeah, we sell a few bulls. We carve at two. I'm pretty strict with anything with bad feet, bad udders, bad temper, bad carvings. They go, and I've been like that now for the last 15 years. We've been pretty ruthless, and it's just also I'm very the myostatin status within the breed, because in the past there was a time when the South Devon was a dual purpose breed. You're still awake? Bloody hell! He's still going. Great. The South Devons were a dual purpose breed, so they went really hard into converting from dual purpose into meat, beef, and there's a myostatin within South Devons, and they say it's the limousine gene or the Belgian blue gene, but there's a gene within them that's been in there for a long time, and they really focus on that muscling gene to the point where there was a lot of hard carvings. So I've been trying to you obviously keep that flesh, but not using them without the myostatin. So I've used a lot of zeros, and I think I'm really proud of the herd we've got now. Without, we've done a few herd competitions. We were fortunate we won the national herd competition a few years ago. That was sort of the highlight of my farming career. So yeah, I'd like to think we've got. I want to be known for having good stock. And it's not about pumping them full of grub. They've got to do it off grass. They've got to, just be efficient really. Because I'm on my own, I can't carry passengers.
I like the sound of all of that. That rings my bell big time. I love that.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah.
having it too, pulling them out, being ruthless. That's all up my street. That is.
Yeah.
And some of the problems, guys, we've got in the industry is that not enough people are ruthless, and they could increase the efficiency of their own business if they were a little bit more ruthless and take out those that don't perform and don't carry passengers. It's great to hear. So, and Julian, we're all very much awake. You almost lost me during the sheep bit, but I can guarantee you I'm still here. So obviously, because I originate from the other side of the border, I'm going to ask one question, and that would be, when it comes to England-Scotland rugby matches, who was the toughest Scottish opponent you came across?
I think without being sort of condescending, and I wouldn't want to when you get to a certain level, everyone's a good player. You have good days and bad days. And to play Scotland in Scotland, it's fantastic. And you realise it's just passion. And that's, I sort of think with Scotland, they've got such a small group of players, yet they play to, they obviously beat England this year. And you look at the depth and the strength of English rugby, you got to say, what are we doing so wrong? Because really, you go to Scotland with all the players we've got in England, we should have, it was the borders at one time. That was where they pulled the players from, and it's fantastic. So yeah, when I played rugby, it was the more hostile, the better. I used to hear stories when I was younger. You used to hear about playing in France. I'm not knocking it. And they're really physical and they're really hostile. Brilliant. That's where you want to go and play. Surely. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, an easy game. You want to go and there's loads of really tough, great players, and you want to test yourself against them. It's not about being a tough guy. It's just about challenging yourself.
Yeah.
So you were never really known for your ballet skills, were you, Julian, on the rugby pitch?
Well, I think
I was watching a few highlight reels earlier on, and the only one time I saw you dancing, I think, was on Cockers.
Oh yeah. Well, that was at a time where you learn the hard way. I went to New Zealand, and it was, I think it's an amazing country, fantastic people, beautiful country, and their ethos in life I get. Do you know what I mean? They've got like a can-do culture, but you play rugby, and I'm not a tough guy. You play rugby, it's a physical game, and you've got to. You meet fire with fire, and I remember falling in a ruck over there, and I didn't get out of the way, and this Kiwi guy just booted I got out of the way. From then on, if I got into a ruck, you were doing all you can to get off the floor. But at the same time, if somebody fell the wrong side, you got to administer a bit of pain so they don't stay there for too long. And Cockers, there's certain players you really want to get there. But that was it was a different game. Yeah,
you're claiming not to be a tough guy, but I don't know if you're aware of this, but Rugby Lens has named you the hardest number 3 to ever play the game.
Wow.
Andrew Sheridan had a fright in the night, and lo and behold, it was Julian White. Because you gave him a good hiding. We've got a stamp on Tony Woodcock.
Tony Woodcock.
Malcolm O'Reilly. We tried to knock him out, and we've even criticised Manu Tuilagi for not not trying to punch properly.
It really wasn't a criticism. But hey, it was a different time. What I will say is, do what you can do. And do it as well as you can do. Do you know what I mean? So there's no point in me running down the pitch. If it was clearing out ruck, people said, "Oh, when you played, I threw the ball to Whitey and he threw it back and said I don't want it." That's just absolute crap. Sorry for swearing. But if I could clear a ruck out or tie someone up, or I used to love scrummaging. You can impose your own physicality. Then you can make a difference to the game. So just do what you can do and do it as well as you can do. And that's in life, really.
And that's the joy of rugby for me. That's why I played awfully. Don't get me wrong. I was a terrible, terrible rugby player for quite a long time. But I loved it because you cannot do your job if you're as a winger or whatever, unless you've done your other guy's done his job as a tight head or a loose head. It requires everyone. So cricket, which I also love, you can be a bowler and you can do your job just as a bowler. But in rugby, it's the team ethos. You rely on everybody. That's the joy of it for me.
Well, that's exactly it. It's a team sport. I mean, it was a very different game now than it is now. And I look back and think how fortunate I was to have played when I did. I would be playing now. I'd be banned. It's fantastic. And I look back and I think, I can't believe the opportunities that I had. And, I think that's life, really, without being too philosophical, that you need a bit of luck and you need some opportunities. And it's just sometimes taking yourself out of your comfort zone. I'm not a people person, I'm not I do social media now, and it's more out of desperation, really, because starting from scratch from farming with very little capital behind me, it's been hard. And my daughter Lucy and my wife Sarah, they were saying, you're so passionate. So I've started doing, obviously, Instagram now. I'm not saying it, well, I do Instagram now, and I sort of think, well, if something, it might show somebody that's not from a farming background that, you can do it. It's not easy, but it's been, and it is a real struggle. It's not, and I hope the beef prices do keep going up and lamb prices keep going up. Because it's not easy for all of us.
So, and your family, are they sharing your passion in cattle, sheep, and rugby? One or the other? Neither.
Yeah.
Is there a budding Julian White in the ranks in the the under?
Yeah. Will, my son, he's playing rugby. He's pretty keen, but you just got to think. I mean, I think all of us, you sit there and watch. It used to be rugby special, or and you sort of dream about it. I didn't when I was younger. I didn't play lots of age grade stuff. I just played rugby, and I played for things just fell into place. I did get banned for quite a lot of quite a bit of my career, unfortunately, and that used to just focus my mind. I got banned for a year once, and I just thought, and I had a really good friend, and he wrote me a letter, and without being sort of saying that I need to focus on, and that sort of stuck with me, really. And things happen, I've had lots of things happen in my life, which just make sort of give you a bit of steel. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. So we'll play rugby. Lucy, my eldest daughter, she's quite interested in farming, but it's we've all got our own lives. It doesn't mean just 'cause I like farming doesn't mean somebody else got to. You just got to do what you do and enjoy it, and then whatever.
Yeah.
So
everyone's got to lead their own path.
Julian. So you've obviously taken your commitment to be the best in your sport into what you do now in your daily job, which is farming, but there must have been a point in your rugby career when you thought, "Hey, I'm pretty good at this."
I didn't actually. No, I didn't. No, I never thought. Didn't even cross my mind. I used to think I was always very self-critical. I loved it. That feeling of Saturday morning for a game. I was fortunate to play for Leicester Tigers. I played for lots of really fantastic sides, but it's you train with them all week. You fall out with them, but that Saturday morning for a game, or a Sunday or a Friday evening, whenever it is, you're all mates together, and it's that feeling, before you're going to go out. And it's not about banging your head. I didn't need to go and headbutt the wall or shout and swear. Just sit there quietly. You know what you're going to do, and it's just like, I've got your back. And I say to the boys now, I help Will with his, I say help. Look after your mate beside you. If he's on the floor, you pick him up. You just look after your mate beside you, and that's what rugby's about. Where it's clearing somebody out, making a tackle, offloading, a pass, pushing hard in the scrum. You look after your mate beside you.
So if you didn't have that moment as a youngster, then it must have been when you were called up to England for the first time that there must have been some realisation that whether you didn't think you were very good, some other people thought you were very good.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't care whether people thought I was good or bad. It's amazing. I went from. I played in Bridgend, and that was a bit of an eye-opener, to be fair. That was a couple of years. It was like the most enjoyable, like just bonkers rugby and I was there, and I thought, I got approached by the sides within Wales, and I thought, well, I want to go and play for an English side. I probably always lacked a bit of confidence. So when I was younger, they sort of said, would you go and, why don't you get a bath or try a different, and I just never really backed myself. So when I was perhaps 15 or 16, I should have done that, but I didn't. By eventually, I sort of, I suppose, forced my way to. I went to Saracens, Saracens drove down. I was in Wales. They drove down one morning with a contract about 7 o'clock and said, "Look, will you sign this and come and play for us?" So I thought, well, if Saracens are willing to do that, I'll go. And so I did that. And then within a short period of time, they said I had a message to say you've been, would you England A? I played for England A, and you think, oh, that's amazing, And then there was a tour to South Africa, and the head coach said, look, we want you to start against South Africa. So my first cap was in South Africa, in Johannesburg. We played them. We just narrowly lost, but that's pretty. It all happened fairly quickly, and you're suddenly, sitting on a plane flying to South Africa, and it's like it's a bit of an out of body experience, And I look back now, like my whole rugby career, really, and you think you sat in the tractor or you're lambing a sheep or something. You think, did that really happen all that time ago? It's not until like now we're talking about it, you think, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you remember who was loose head that day for South Africa?
Robbie Kempson, I think it was. Yeah, Robbie Kempson. I can't think. I can't even tell you who played in the. I mean, I'm not going to. It's not. You play lots of games. I find it very hard to sort of go back, and some players can remember every game. I think I've only got a tiny mind, you see, so it gets full up with things very, very quickly, and a lot of stuff just gets binned out of the way. But so I can remember just before the kickoff, I had a bit of a stiff back, and Phil Pask, who was our physio, he went to sort of clip my back and push me through the physio table. So just for us to go out, it was literally about a minute before going out. I said, Pask, you just clip my back a minute because you want to feel just right before the game. And he clipped my back and pushed me right for the table onto the floor. So I pulled myself out of the table and marched out. And the other thing, I don't know why, for like an international, I always wanted to have a new pair of boots. Anyway, I'd gone to some shop and I used to have. Anyway, I got these Adidas boots that I thought were brilliant. And the guy said, if you get me a ticket, you can have them for nothing. So anyway, I put these boots on and played the game. And I didn't realise till afterwards they were like size 14s and I was size 12. So there's about 4 studs at the front just sticking up. I'd never touched the ground for the whole game, I don't think. Yeah.
Julian, you mentioned the time at Bridgend. There was a story I heard about someone operating on your ankle while you were at Bridgend and you watching it. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, well, it's honestly, it's name dropping, but yeah, JPR Williams was. Well, I was over in New Zealand, you see, and I was involved in a very serious car crash, and my leg was broken and quite badly, and I was sort of suddenly everyone falls away from you. So I was playing rugby in New Zealand, and I got asked. I had a phone call one day to go and play for. Literally, a Sunday morning, I was lying in bed, sort of hungover, and I had a phone call to say, "Would you go down to Canterbury and play for the Canterbury Crusaders in the in the Super 12 it was back then?" And I was like, "Really?" And I had to be anyway, I got on a plane. Anyway, long story, I was going to go down and get involved with the Crusaders. They wanted me to perhaps be involved for the following season. They got me a job in the South Island. Anyway, I was involved in what happened to me was nothing. It was a very serious car crash. And all my rugby connections suddenly dropped away. And I was sort of just milking cows in New Zealand thinking, anyway, then I had a phone call just out of the blue saying, "Would you go to Bridgend? Our team manager is a surgeon and he'll sort your leg out for you." And it was JPR, and they were desperate for me to play, and I'd done literally like no fitness. And the first game I played in was Neath, and I could hardly walk, let alone run. And it was down at Neath, and it was a pretty tough day. Do you know what I mean? So then JPR, I had a pin in my leg that was coming out. They said, "Well, I'll operate on it." And I went into the operating theatre. And he goes, "Well, do you want to sit up and watch it, or do you want to, have a full anaesthetic?" I said, "That's right, I'll watch it. Don't worry about it." So I sat there, and he was like the radio. I couldn't believe they had like the radio going, and they was like talking about what they're having for tea. It was like cutting my leg open, So, so it was a brilliant time. It's just great to be able to say I got operated on by JPR. I think he's got a bit of a checkered. I had a few stories about his. But it was amazing. It's a great bloke. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, yeah, the Knoll was where Neath, for the rugby uninitiated, Neath used to play at the Knoll, and they were the All Blacks. And it was just terror stories from people I know who played there. They were really quite a physical bunch, were they not?
Yeah. It was, the rugby, it was, I think when I played there, and the teams they had, and they're not there at that, they're not the, Pontypridd and Neath and there was Newport. Obviously Newport are still going now. Cardiff, but they had all these fantastic sides, and unfortunately it's contracted, and you've lost a lot of them. But it was just amazing. They were a great a really good bunch of lads, and initially Julian from England, with a bit of a plum in his, you had to sort of prove yourself, and it was just brilliant, and from but Neath it was pretty hardcore playing down there, yeah. But there's lots of really tough sides down there. Swansea were good, there was lots of good games.
And then, so back on the farm now then.
Mm.
So I was just poking around and I see that you have now Get Lost in Nature.
Yeah, well, it's pretty like lots of other farmers. I mean, we bought a block of ground. That's what I did, and we fenced it, and I put some barns. I put some good cattle barns I put up. But we were really, really struggling. And then the government said you got to diversify. Well, we had no real assets you could convert. We didn't have any old barns or anything. We just had a bare block of ground, but we did have a bit of woodland, and so we thought, well, let's just do something with that. It was pretty overgrown. You couldn't even see through it, brambles and stuff. So I've cleared out lots of the dead trees and stuff, and we've put in these glamping pods now, like lots of other farmers do. And yeah, we've got a glamping site, which up to it's a bit quiet at the moment, but it's been really good. But it's just Sarah, my wife, works full time. I'm busy. You diversify, you just get another job to subsidise your farm, basically, so you can have some cheap food. So it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not right, is it?
No.
So we're not asking the GPs to put coffee machines in the surgeries to support the surgeries, but we're asking farmers to supply extra income to produce food. Surely something's wrong with the system now.
Ben, on that, there's so many things wrong that our industry is continually challenged to diversify to make ends meet. And Julian's talked about a surgeon already. These surgeons are not expected to work the weekends doing casual jobs just to make ends meet because they can't make a living during the week. But our industry is expected to find other ways of generating income. Now, some diversification is good and it's easy, but we should be getting a proper price for what's produced in the first place so that people could live easier.
So you're busy doing something else because you've diversified, and then you've got you with maggots, or you've got something else, and then one of the general public saying something because you're busy, you're spinning lots of plates. Yeah. And there's only so many hours in a day as well. And then they wonder why farmers struggle with depression or, mental health issues. No, it's not just farming. I understand there's lots of, that's the world nowadays. I understand that, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting you to get much bother from a general public, though, Julian. I think just most people will back off, do they not?
Just tell them to YouTube Julian White fights. Probably leave you alone.
I'm not proud of that.
I kind of missed that. Sorry, I know I'm just swinging back on rugby again, but I kind of missed that stuff. I'm like watching Julian, Eric Champ, and those mad Frenchmen from about 91 just carving people up all the time. And I love watching rugby now, but it's a sanitized version of the sport that I played badly and that you played well. And I'm wondering, do you think it would be better a bit like it was? So if you're on the wrong side, you got cleared out and you wouldn't go on the wrong side again. That was kind of how it worked, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I think we live in a very, if as soon as you start saying things like that, you just sound like old school dinosaur, I think people have got to make their own minds up. All I'll say is I loved it, and I was very fortunate to play when I did. And I'm sure you talk to the players now, they'll say it's amazing what they, it's just perhaps it's a slightly sanitised. It's evolved, isn't it? Sport changes, life changes, and I just look back and think, somebody said to me, could you play today? Could you play in today's game? I said, I don't care. I'm lucky I played when I did, yeah.
It's
like amazing pragmatist
baseline syndrome, Ben, because I bet the guys who play today when they're in their 50s, they'll probably be sat there going, they're not doing it the same way that we did it. It's just your baseline is so much different to everyone else. And
he's old school. I listened to him, so hey, I enjoyed it, and you let them get on with it now, and I just hope they don't rugby. No one wants these. No one wants. I've got a great friend and a player that I love playing with. There's lots of, but Lewis Moody at the moment and what he's going through, and if is there a connection with rugby? I don't know, but things like that. That's just there's no words. But at the same time, I'm sure if you asked Lewis, he wouldn't play any other way because that's just how he was built and how he played the game. And it was 110%, probably more than that. He was a fantastic person to play with, and you want, like I said, you look after your mate beside you, and he was a really good mate.
That's a horror story, isn't it? And there's so many of the other ones around at the same time.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So, Julian, we're hosting Beef Expo at Milton Mowbray Market, and there will be some South Devon performance classes most likely that day, Saturday the 30th of May. You maybe put that in your diary if it's not already in. So, you'll make sure
I'd like to come along, definitely.
Yeah.
And the performance recording, I mean, I get that, the figures thing, that. I mean, I sell balls, you've got to have figures with it, and I don't do it well enough, and it's something I've got to really address, really. The bottom line, they've got to be functional cattle, no passengers. You don't want to be jacking everything out, carving, they've got to get on, thrive on grass. I can say margins are tight, aren't they?
Well, there's a guy not too far from you who used to play for Northampton and Leicester, who is your local performance recording guy and will come round and scan your cattle. And I've said that, and I'm having a complete brainerism.
Stuart Friswold.
Yes, Stuart. So yeah, obviously you know him well. So yeah, you've got a foot in the door there already. You just got to give him a buzz. Hey, he's a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think these genomics and stuff, that's perhaps, because it's funny how many with our breed, I mean, I'm not knocking them either, but suddenly they've all got very good figures, and they haven't changed their breeding too much. There's a lot of feeding and,
Independent data is absolutely crucial to that. And especially when it comes to calving. One of the exciting things I think we have around the corner, hopefully, is with livestock information. When that comes online, replacing BCMS, there'll be an opportunity for commercial people to put a calving score in for animals that they have no vested interest in. And here's me being a nose now and boring the pants off everyone. But if you can get independent calving data, I think that would take away some of people's concerns over the veracity of the information and combine that with the genomics, like you're saying. And actually, we've got a way to make some serious progress. And it's only just around the corner now.
So are you all suckler cows? Do you all keep suckler cows? The rest of you, I should know, but
yeah. So I have some pedigree and some commercial cattle, and then James is obviously
we're all just commercial sucklers.
Oh right. Do you keep stabilizers, James? No.
Yeah, we're all pretty well getting towards all stabilizers now. So yeah, we're near enough all there.
Yeah.
Big
Neil?
breed. I do like them. Again, though, same thing. It's the data. That's what sold them to me, was just the data and being able to make decisions based on that.
Yeah, so and historically, Julian, I bred pedigree cementals and a few shorthorns as well, actually. But the next generation are doing that now, so I'm a little bit more distant. I do this full time now for the National Beef Association. So your membership application's in the post. I sent it out today. Yeah,
pre-filled.
Yeah. Just needs a signature. So, I mean, the performance recording, we could, and maybe we should, guys. We could have a full podcast on that. And the pros and cons, and the benefits and challenges that it creates, and something we could bear in mind for the future, I think. And we'll get a few people that are for it and a few against it, and just let them rip. See where we end up.
Yeah, we really must do that. I think that would be an important one to crash in on. And lastly, my last cow question to Julie. Sorry, it was: do you do pelvic measuring on your heifers to carve them down at 2?
I don't. No, I don't. I mean, over the years, you get to know which cow families have been performed, and that's what I'm left with now. So the ones that lost time or started calving, I don't carve anything in the autumn because I can't afford to carry them through the winter, really. So everything calves and goes straight out onto grass. I don't, within the South Devon, we've talked about it. It has been done. Some breeders do it, but I don't. It's just, like a lot of my farming, it's all what I see, experience. I've used some bulls in the past which have worked really well, and others that haven't quite so much. And the ones that don't work quite so well don't last very long. They have to go on. We're all passionate about our individual breeds, and that's why we've got individual breeds. Obviously I'm passionate about the South Devons and temperament and everything else that they've got. But I mean, it's encouraging people into suckler cow. How are we going to? Because it seems to me that it's decreasing all the time at the moment.
Yeah. So we've had a little bit of a pickup this year, have we not, Neil, in the numbers of cattle, which is a first positive sign.
Yeah. So the speed of let's say, reduction, or even reduction in England is almost stopped, but it's a long way from turning round. And hopefully the values that livestock are at the moment might help that. And we need more than just values. We need some, horizon planning from government, a little bit more longer term commitment and stability. And, if you look at the last 6 years, so if we go back to almost exactly 6 years, Easter was almost as late as it can be, I think, in 2020, and the first COVID lockdown. Beef prices almost doubled today what it was back then. But we've had all the challenging spikes that have been since COVID. We've had Ukraine, whatever we want to call it. We've had Liz Truss's, budget that create an economic challenge as well. And now we've got the challenges in Iraq. We've had a change of government itself, which causes a little bit of challenge. And then the inheritance tax thing last year, which just, sucked every dying breath out of the industry and all plans for future investment because people were just terrified. So, yeah, what we need is a 5, 7, 10-year plan which shows commitment and support, prices to remain where they are or even get a little bit better, and we will see a turnaround, hopefully.
I mean, whether some of these bigger estates and stuff, whether that have perhaps just focused on arable or one thing, whether they'll start to incorporate some just to help with fertility and stuff like that. I don't know if there's any mileage on that happening at all. It's getting skilled people to manage those cattle, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, we're beginning to see small signs of more cattle appearing in the eastern side of the country where the big sort of arable units are, because the ground all the organic matter has been sucked out of the ground, and petrochemical fertilizers are expensive, and cattle maybe didn't fit their system with previous values, but current values they probably work quite well, and it's a win-win, and we could see some growth from that for sure.
Yeah, we did it this year, Julian. We worked with our next door arable farm, and they got some overwintered cover crops, about 240 acres. And we outwintered our cattle on those, and
jammy burger.
Put them a lot of them into spring barley. So there's a few fields that they didn't put cover crop on that they've direct drilled, and I'm kind of really hoping that my cattle ones have come out better than direct drill ones. We'll have a bit more of that.
But that'd be brilliant, and that's the sort of information, because I want to grow, I want to keep some more cattle, but I mean I don't think any of us farmers or most farmers can't afford to go out and buy great chunks of ground now, because it's just unattainable. But it's just trying to I perhaps shouldn't get out, but I was speaking to somebody the other day and he was saying that everything looks really positive and we should be working with arable farmers, but it's just trying to make that link so that we can some bit better if we could work along together a bit more easily.
Yeah, and I think for us, the way I look at it is we can actually carry more stock on our home farm if we can sort of guarantee that we're going to work with an arable farm in the winter, because I've not got to then make the winter forage, because I'm going to put them on their cover crops. So that's more acres that I can put cattle on, which means I can run more cattle, and the operation just gets bigger from there. So it's just about balancing. But it is, again, about that cohesion. You just got to get someone to work with you. But hopefully now we've kind of broke that barrier, it'll snowball. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So if there was one piece of advice, Julian, because you've came through, a sporting career with great success, and you're now enjoying some, real success in your farming career. We're real advocates to give youngsters a chance. That's why James is here, because he's our youngster. If you were given one strong piece of advice for someone, because what you've done is really quite admirable, to start from scratch. Not many people have got the balls to do that, so fair play. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give to someone that's late teens or early 20s looking to start out in the industry? And you can say beef or sheep. We don't normally allow too much talk about sheep on our podcast, but it will make this an exception tonight for you.
Well, I just think, if you're passionate, I mean, you're going to get knockbacks. You just got to keep going forward. Keep trying to look forward. Do you know what I mean? Keep looking at the horizon and keep trudging towards it. It's not going to be easy, and there's going to be a few trips along the way, but pick yourself up and keep going. And I had a huge, probably when I was younger, for lots of things, a bit of an inferiority complex, and I didn't feel like I've quite, and it sort of drove me on all the more. So it's. You're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and I think we all do. And it's just, you just got to love what you do. It doesn't pay the bills, and, there's some days when it's really, really tough. But you just got to, you get one life, that's what I thought, we've built the farm, and I look back now. I mean, I've got many years to go. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm glad I've done it. Because you wouldn't. I hear people and they say, "Oh, I wish I nearly did that. I could have done that. I would have done that." You didn't do it. Give it a go.
That's great.
It's a great piece of advice and a very strong point. We're only here once, so make the best of it. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't have to do anything.
no.
That is a pretty strong way to wrap this up, I would imagine, if there's no other questions from the other guys. So,
Well, thank you.
Julian White MBE, which we never even mentioned.
Yeah.
51 caps for your country.
Yeah.
4 Lions starts, 3 Prem titles, and a partridge in a pear tree. That's not too shabby.
Wow.
So thank you so much for coming on and joining us on Stakeholders.
Thank you for asking me. It's been. I'm sorry about the bit of a cock up to start with, but I mean, me and technical, I've said, but it was. Thank you very much. It's been good to meet you all. I look forward to meeting you in person at some point.
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
See you at Melton Mowbray on the thing.
Yeah. Hopefully you can make it to Melton Mowbray. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
And good luck with your lambing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sheep.
Yeah. No worries. Thank you.
All right.
Cheers,
Cheers,
Julian.
take
Thank
care.
you.
Cheers, then.